All right, and hello everyone. Welcome to Election Day 2024. Wanted to share with you one final update on where things stand as of today in terms of the 2024 race. Thanks so much for tuning in. Of course, I recorded a video yesterday sharing the updated polymarket odds, and I know I had a blank screen yesterday, so I apologize for that. Wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure that I had my laptop on today, and that's what I'm using to show you the final RCP averages, where the race stands. I'm recording this off my iPhone, and I'm holding my phone in my hand, so again, I apologize for the slight movement. So let's dive in. First, with the national popular vote, you can see Kamala Harris leads 0.1% in the popular vote. And again, this doesn't really mean anything. Now, obviously, if we look back in years past, we obviously know that ideally for anyone to win the popular vote, they need to be ahead by at least 2 points. So the fact that it's essentially a dead tie in the popular vote between Trump and Harris, that easily could signify a Trump victory. Of course, we don't know that for sure. And again, I'm not trying to be biased toward any candidate, but this is a super, super close race. Now, for contrast, look at 2020. Biden was supposed to win the popular vote by 7.2. He only won it by 4.5. So you have roughly a 2.5-point margin of error. And Hillary, in 2016, it was a little bit better. Hillary Clinton was ahead by 3.2 on this date, and she only won the popular vote by 2.1. But of course, we know she lost the electoral map to Trump because of Trump sweeping the Rust Belt trio states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So to see this race at a dead tie is historic. And I also saw a post earlier this morning that this was the first time that going into any election day, it was the very first time that the popular vote, the national popular vote, was at a dead tie. The last time that happened was 1981, with the election between Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. Of course, if you were around at that time, which I personally was not, but for those of you that were around at that time, you may remember that Ronald Reagan did win in a landslide, and again, that was the last time that the national popular vote was essentially a dead tie going into Election Day. So maybe that signals something, maybe it does not, but again, that's just the popular vote. So now let's get into the swing states, the final margins. You can see in North Carolina, Donald Trump, and I apologize for these pop-ups that are super, super annoying. So we can see in North Carolina, Donald Trump leads by 1.2 points going into today. And for contrast, on this day in 2020, that was exactly Trump's winning margin in the Tar Heel State, was 1.2 points. He goes into the day leading by 1.2. You can see, for contrast, on this day in 2020, Trump went into North Carolina with a 0.2 lead. He won by 1.2, so you had a 1-point margin of error. 2016, Trump went in up 0.8 over Hillary Clinton. Trump went on to win by 3.6, so you had roughly about a 2.5-point margin of error in 2016. You had exactly a 1-point margin of error on this day in 2020. So if we go back to 2020 and we kind of focus in on that and go off of the margin of error of 1 point, Trump would be on pace to win North Carolina by 2.2 points, which I personally think he's looking really, really good to do. We can see Atlas Intel, the most accurate pollster in 2020, Trump +2 in North Carolina. They came out with a final swing state poll last night, and so they have Trump +2. So that is North Carolina. Going down to Georgia, so again, North Carolina is looking really, really good for Trump. 16 electoral votes there. Now down in the peach state of Georgia, 2020, Joe Biden flipped it by 0.2, and Donald Trump leads there by 1.3 going into today. And now, for contrast, you can see in 2020, he went in up by 1. Joe Biden won by 0.3. So you had roughly about a half-point margin of error in Georgia in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. Trump went into today up 4.8. He won it by 5.1, so roughly a 0.3 margin of error in 2016. So if you have a 0.3 margin of error in either direction This year, you roughly would get about a Trump +1 to anywhere from that to a Trump +6 or excuse me, anywhere from Trump +1.5 to 6 roughly with the margin of error. So Donald Trump is looking really, really good in Georgia. Obviously, Georgia is really important, 16 electoral votes, just like in North Carolina. Moving out to Arizona, you can see this is the state that definitely looks like a Trump lock. Atlas Intel, Trump +5 last night. I think that's a little overdone. Trump leads by 2.8. On this day in 2020, Biden was ahead by 0.9. He won it by 0.3, so a roughly about a half-point margin of error in 2020. In 2016, Trump went in up 4 points. He won it by 3.5 over Hillary Clinton. So in Arizona, you have exactly a half a point margin of error in both 2016 and 2020. So if we add in the half-point margin of error in either direction, Trump will win Arizona anywhere from 2.3 to 3.3, so roughly about 2.5 to 3.5 in Arizona for Donald Trump. And again, the early voting numbers that we've seen out of Arizona today look absolutely amazing. Now, the one thing I do want to mention about Arizona with the early voting today, there have been a ton of independent voters, actually more independent voters than Democratic voters in the Grand Canyon state. So that could be really, really, really important. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And the same in Nevada. Nevada's early numbers looked great for Republicans. And obviously, in terms of the election day voting that we've gotten so far in Nevada, Republicans, again, are looking really good. However, the lead has significantly narrowed. Independent voters are catching up to Republicans. Democrats still have a little bit of work to do. You can see in the RCP average, Trump came in 0.6. Joe Biden in 2020 came into today with a 2.4% lead. And that is the exact margin that he won the state by. 2016, Trump was ahead by 0.8. Hillary Clinton was able to flip it by 2.4. So if you go off of the 2020 margin and Donald Trump being ahead by 0.6, he would be exactly on pace for a roughly about a half a point victory in Nevada if we have the same exact spot-on polling that we had in 2020 with Joe Biden. So Nevada is going to be a state to watch. Now, it's not the most important state for Trump. It's only worth 6 electoral votes, the smallest out of all of the 7 key battlegrounds, but Nevada is definitely going to be a state to watch. And if you're Donald Trump, you don't want it to come down to Nevada. So Nevada is going to be a state to watch. Now we get to the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is super, super important. And you can see today in Wisconsin, Kamala Harris on average leads by 0.4%. Joe Biden, we know, was supposed to win it by 6.7. He lost it by 0.7. The same for Hillary Clinton. She was ahead on election day in Wisconsin by 6.5. She lost it by 0.7. So do I think Wisconsin's going to be a 6-point margin of error this time? I don't think so. Now, we do know Wisconsin has severely underestimated Trump in the last 2 cycles. I personally think it could be maybe about a 3.5 point margin of error in Wisconsin, which is exactly what we have. If you look down through the list of polls that we have here in the aggregate, the average margin of error is about 3 points. So if we have a 3-point margin of error again with Harris being ahead by 0.4, that would equal out to a Trump 3.5 point victory in Wisconsin, which I definitely see it. I definitely could see that happening. Now, moving to Michigan. Now, Wisconsin is the most conservative of the Rust Belt trio. Now, moving up into Michigan, the Wolverine State, 15 electoral votes up for grabs. Wisconsin, of course, is super important. It's worth 10 votes. Michigan's worth 15. Michigan is considered the most liberal out of the Rust Belt trio. Kamala Harris leads by 0.5%. Going into today, going back to 2020, Joe Biden went into Election Day up 4.2. He won it by 2.8, so roughly a 1.5 point margin of error. In 2016, Hillary Clinton went into Election Day in Michigan with the lead by 3.6. She lost it by 0.31, so about a 2.5, 3 point margin of error in 2016. So on average, we see in Michigan, it's roughly about a 3-point margin of error. So if we have a 3-point margin of error in Michigan this time, Donald Trump would be on pace to win Michigan by about 3.5 points, which I know it's looking to be quite tough, but definitely not impossible. Of course, Donald Trump ended his campaign in Michigan at a rally in Grand Rapids. that started, I believe, at midnight or 12:30 this morning, went until, I believe, 2:30. So super, super late into the early hours of this morning. Now in Pennsylvania, this is the state that everybody's watching, the Keystone State, 19 electoral votes up for grabs. This is the very key state that both candidates are honing in on. Both candidates, Trump and Harris, campaigned there like crazy yesterday. I saw pictures on Twitter of Harris campaigning there yesterday, as well as knocking on doors. So obviously Pennsylvania, a super, super important state. Donald Trump leads there by 0.4 going into election day, 0.4%. Look at 2020. And when I saw this earlier this morning, I was like, oh my gosh, if this actually verifies compared to 2020, this would be absolutely amazing in the Keystone State for Trump. Look at 2020. Joe Biden was going into election day up 1.2 in Pennsylvania. Look at the final margin. Joe Biden, 1.2. Spot on, 100% accurate going into election day in 2020 in Pennsylvania. Look at 2016. 2016 was also close. Hillary Clinton went into this day in Pennsylvania 8 years ago up 2.1. She ended up losing it by 0.7. So you roughly had about a 2.5 margin of error in 2016. You were dead on in 2020 with Joe Biden's 1.2% victory here. A lot of major election prediction channels have predicted roughly about anywhere from 0.2 to 0.7 here in Pennsylvania. Of course, I'm located in Ohio, which is close to Pennsylvania, but still, this is great news if you're Donald Trump. 0.4 going into the election, and if he wins by this same exact margin, this would be absolutely historic. You would have back-to-back cycles of the RCP average getting it exactly right in Pennsylvania should this verifies. Now, obviously, we're probably not going to know the results here until late tomorrow morning, as, of course, there were problems in Pennsylvania. They extended the election day voting until 10 o'clock tonight. So, obviously, we know Pennsylvania counts their votes more slowly as opposed to North Carolina and Georgia, so I would not expect to know Pennsylvania until roughly 6 to 7 a.m. tomorrow morning when everybody wakes up. It could be earlier than that, could be later than that. We really don't know at this time, but those are the updates there. In those key battlegrounds, I want to look at Texas, just to go through a couple of other states. Texas, Trump goes into today with a 9-point lead. Now, what's also crazy about Texas is this was the exact margin that he won by in 2016 over Hillary Clinton, a 9.0% victory. He leads by 9.0 points in Texas, and of course, Texas apparently has gotten some excellent early voting numbers in favor of Trump, so we hope that trend continues. Now, looking at some other potential swing states very quickly, in Minnesota, Harris leads by 4 points, so maybe Minnesota gets a little competitive. It's too hard to say right now. Only a 4% lead for Harris. So again, that's almost within the margin of error. So Minnesota may be pretty close. And looking at Virginia, Virginia could also be in play, and Harris leads by 5 here, by 5 points going into today. So Virginia doesn't seem like it's going to flip. However, the early voting update numbers today that I've seen out of Virginia look extremely good for Trump. Some very key Democratic counties in the northern part of the state, at least as of earlier this morning to mid-morning, have seen very little turnout. So if that trend continues, Virginia might actually flip Republican, which would be the first time since George Bush Jr. in 2004. So Virginia could also be in play. Now, a very key state here in New Hampshire. Harris leads by 4.2 in the RCP average. Remember, we've seen great early voting numbers out of New Hampshire. We had one county in New Hampshire that votes at midnight in 2020. Donald Trump did not win any votes there. He won 2 votes there in 2016 compared to Hillary Clinton's 4 votes. And this year, it was a 3-3 tie between Trump and Harris in that particular county. So New Hampshire, people are saying if the rural early voting turnout continues the way they have seen it, New Hampshire might just flip to Donald Trump, which again would be the first time since George Bush Jr. in 2000 that a Republican might have a chance at New Hampshire. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on today. I would highly encourage going through social media to get the up-to-the-minute updates. Of course, there are several major election prediction channels that will be going live on YouTube tonight. Some of them will be going live roughly at about 6 to 6:30. Another one I heard a little bit ago will be going live at 5 or 5:30. So make sure that if you want to see all of that information, just go to YouTube at that time and search in the search bar. You can search 2024 election, and you definitely should be able to see their live streams from that point. I'm going to record very quickly a second video going over the latest Polymarket odds. Polymarket is shifted like crazy today. Going into the day, Donald Trump had a 63% chance, so stay tuned for that very, very quickly. And thanks so much for watching this update of the 2024 election forecast.